Welcome, everyone, to the Ready, Set, Grow podcast. My name is Joe Dales, and I'm one of the founders of RH Accelerator. Today, our guest host is Fred Wall, one of our great innovators in agriculture. Hi, Fred.
Hi, Joe.
And our special guest is Ray Bouchard, CEO of Enns Brothers, one of Canada's leading John Deere and farm equipment dealerships. So welcome, Ray, and can you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're from and your journey becoming CEO of Enns Brothers?
Yeah, good morning, Joe. Morning, Fred. Thanks for the invite, Joe. I'll take you through a bit of what my journey was in agriculture here in Western Canada. Currently, I'm the CEO and president of Enns Brothers. To your point, we're an 8-store operation here in Manitoba. We've got an area responsibility that covers over 5.5 million acres here in the province, which is just over 50% of the arable acres. We're a John Deere dealer group, but hopefully we'll have a chance to talk about how we've evolved our business so that we started on a journey a number of years ago to move away from just being an equipment supplier to really becoming a full partner with growers. So I'll talk a little bit about that. But prior to that, I'll back up a step. Back in the 80s, I worked for a manufacturing company in Manitoba. It was a small company that manufactured granular herbicide and fertilizer application equipment. So I worked there for about 10 years, and in my capacity there, I was vice president of sales. Dealt a lot with equipment dealers from across Western Canada and the northern plains of the U.S. Also spent a fair bit of time working with the crop input dealers. So that was my first exposure to agriculture. So that was, I think, back in 81. Then into the 90s, I moved into the distribution business for agriculture in Western Canada. I worked for a company at that time called Rambach, and we were a Western Canadian distribution company dealing primarily with the crop input sector, providing fertilizer application equipment, blending facilities. And then in the 90s, if you remember, that's really when high clearance sprayers were introduced to the market. Mm-hmm. So I started there in the early 90s, probably 91. And I can tell you, we were the distributor for the Tyler sprayer, okay, which is now the C&H sprayer. And I spent 3 years in an Ford F-350 flatbed truck with a trailer with a sprayer on it. And I traveled most of Western Canada demonstrating the Tyler Patriot sprayer. So I was early on involved on the introduction of the high clearance sprayers into Western Canada. Wow. So that was in the 90s. And then in 1999, at that time I was just an employee, and I was looking for an ownership opportunity. And I got to know a couple of the principals in the Enns Brothers group. And at that time they were looking for an operating partner that was willing to make an investment in their Portage La Prairie operation. So I joined them in 1999 and became the general manager of their Portage operation. And from 99 till about 06, I was the store manager in Portage La Prairie. And then in 06, I joined the overall organization, transitioned my investment in one store into ownership of the whole group, and became their vice president of sales and marketing. And we continued to grow out the company. And then about 3 years ago, the original founder's son, Vic, retired. And so I stepped into his position. So I've been in agriculture for since 81. My takeaway or my highlights from my perspective for me is that I was involved on the manufacturing side. Mm-hmm. I was involved in the distribution side, and I'm now involved on the retail side. So I was kind of through all three of those areas as it relates to agriculture. And the other one that I think has provided me a lot of insight into where we should be going and maybe what some of the things are that we need to do differently was my exposure to early precision ag in the 90s and the challenges we had at adoption of precision ag in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
There was starts and stops, and
Yeah.
it was really a challenge. But if I had to summarize it, is we never really had the tools at the field gate or at the farm gate, field level, to actually really advance it. And the great news now is that we have those tools that are there. So
Exciting.
So aside from being the CEO, I've been in agriculture for 30, 80s, 90s, 40 years. uh, um, and I've taken a pretty active role in what we can also do to advance the whole industry. And I am currently a board member of Protein Industries Canada. I also chair a not-for-profit group here in Manitoba called Emily, which I'll talk a little bit more about. But we were part of the original work on the supercluster initiative that came out from the federal government. There was a group of us in Western Canada that were working hard to make sure that agriculture was successful in receiving some of that funding for industry-driven innovation. So the Emily group partnered up with Protein Industries Canada under one submission, and we were successful. And I continue to sit on the board of Protein Industries Canada, which there's a lot of great work being done there. There's some pretty interesting projects, technology projects that are being funded. And there's a fair bit of capacity building work that is going to be ongoing in the next couple of years that I think will really help position agri-food as we go forward. The Emily initiative here in Manitoba, it's a not-for-profit, and its focus is around advancing the digital ag economy, first here in Manitoba and secondly across Western Canada. And I was part of the founding member group of that board, and we've been able to get strong industry support. And about a year and a half ago, we were fortunate enough to put a program together with the University of Winnipeg, and we've got a pretty interesting project that we're working on with them around the creation of labeled data sets for crops and plants that really will become an open data set for tech companies, legacy companies in terms of the advancement of ag tech down the road. Terrific. So there's a lot going on there, but that's where I'm at in agriculture right now and the role I'm playing.
Thanks for your leadership on those, and I think we'll want to have Bill Gruel on from PIC and learn more about that, and also Emily. So we'll do a future show with them as well. But yeah, thanks for your leadership in driving those projects forward. It's exciting for me to see some of the innovation bubbling up.
Yeah.
So Ray, one of the things you had mentioned right at the start is that you had a different vision for what the dealership could look like, and sort of diversifying the services provided. And so, can you speak a little bit to that for us?
Sure, we'd be happy to do that. So I'm going to say it was in the mid, probably 2007, 2008. I was fortunate enough to be part of a key group of dealers that had pretty good engagement with Deere leadership around what their vision was for agriculture, what the vision for the future of equipment was going to be. And it was around then that we were exposed to the fact that field equipment was going to become all technology enabled. And so the ability to receive and transmit data in the field. And for me, that was the point where I had shared with you earlier how I said I was part of the early precision ag, where it was all being driven by the crop input providers primarily. Mm-hmm. They were down to farming by the foot, I can still remember the Ag Chem soil election machine, which was a variable rate fertilizer application. But what was happening is there really wasn't enough tools for the growers to connect with those advanced practices to really be able to quantify what the results of that and what the performance of that was. And so we saw a lot of starts and stops. And if you think about even in the 90s, the accuracy of the yield monitors and the combines were not very good.
Mm-hmm.
And so also at that time, not all growers had carts and scales like they do today.
Mm-hmm.
So your ability to really quantify your behaviors, to really glean insights, was really challenged. But when we started talking about what it meant for our business, now that equipment was becoming technology enabled, for us, what we realized was that we were really getting to a convergence point that had never happened in agriculture before. And that convergence was about the equipment in the field, the technology that's on that equipment and the enabling of that technology, and its ability to be a strong carrier for data. And then the last piece was the agronomy piece. And what we saw pretty quick was that they were now converged. And as an organization, we felt that to really advance production agriculture at the farm gate, you really had to be able to bring all those three together and have those connected and have a way to extract insights so that you could continue to change your business behavior, to continue to improve, to optimize your business. And so for us, we were in the equipment space. We could sell equipment, we could provide the parts, and we could provide the service. The technology enablement on the equipment, from our perspective, we needed to be able to bring on resources to be able to not just have a heavy duty mechanic, but have some pretty technology enabled individuals working for us. So at that time, we introduced what we call solution support people, which have way more technology skill sets and understand the application of that technology to the equipment. And then the final piece for us was the agronomy piece. What we were seeing in the market at that time is there were crop input suppliers or third-party consultants that were providing agronomic services, but there wasn't really a strong integration of all three pieces. And so we felt it was extremely critical for us to have that resource and that skill set in-house. And so what we've done is we introduced agronomy as a part of our service offering. And so we started back in 2012. Today we have 6 full-time agronomists on staff. We've got approximately 7 solution support people, which are really our technology and product people. And we brought that all together into our offerings for the customers. So really we're playing a different, broader role for customers. For some customers today, they still have their agronomists and they still have their third parties they're working with. So our focus now with those customers is around making sure that our equipment, the technology in the equipment, is capable of collecting good, clean data, so that their partners have access to it and they can find a way to bring those three pieces together.
Ray, when you first went to market with this, what was the response like from customers?
So the first thing we did is we conducted a series of about 100 interviews with growers across our area. And we just didn't do a focus group. We had individual interviews and we hired a firm to do this for us. And we tried to do it in a way, and the way we positioned it was, okay, here's the role for our organization. Here's where we think we're going to go. And we actually got them to introduce the conversation around the agronomy. And it was interesting because at the very start of the interviews, they would ask the question about, how do you see Enns Brothers' role? Do you see Enns Brothers playing a role in agronomy? And I can tell you, out of those 100 customers, 95 said that is not the role for that organization. Like, why would they even do that? And by the time we finished the interview, and the interview process was meant to stir thought and to think about where we were and where we were going, that shifted dramatically between the time we started the interview and the time we finished the interview, to the point that I'd say 50% of the interviewees that we sat down with said, you know what, based on what you just talked about from a data collection perspective, from the importance of understanding agronomy and production as it relates to equipment application, that starts to make more sense. And the importance of data, that all started to cascade out. So we took that as a affirmation of the strategy, and then started building it out. What I can tell you is that we continue to, the agronomy side of it is not our core, is not the main reason we're in it. It's so we can do a better job on the equipment technology side and bringing it all together. And at the foundation of all of that now, that's what's really built out, is the importance of good data. So, because we're going to get in a conversation about where we're going with equipment in the future, and it will be all about data and sensors. And so, so it's been a journey. We have a number of customers that are working with us on the agronomy side of the business, but it's much more than that. It's about tying all those pieces together, and we continue to grow our engagement with growers on the data side. And we think that's one of the most important things we can do to really bring value for a farmer. So,
and Ray, that actually, you may have anticipated the next place I'm going to go. I'm curious, you saw this coming in precision ag, the need for data, for customers to have a different kind of support to deepen your relationship with the existing relationship you had. What do you anticipate is the most important change that all of us in ag and food are going to have to think about over the next 5 years?
So I'm gonna, our business is primarily crop production. So I won't go to the livestock side. I'll just stay narrow here in terms of crop production. We're being challenged in a number of areas in production agriculture, whether it's China deciding they're going to put in an embargo on canola importation. We got commodity pricing issues. We got the price of equipment has really gotten expensive. So if you take a look at the economics at the farm gate, growers need to become as optimized as possible at the farm gate. So I'll narrow in there first, and then I'll kind of move out the chain after that. So one of the things we have to absolutely do is work with growers to try to best position them to optimize the resources they have today. And there's a lot of conversations we're having with growers about, it's not necessarily about growing the acres on the farm now. It might be improving the land on the farm. And it's about understanding which land, and most growers really understand this, which land can they get a quicker return on in terms of land improvements. And land improvements could be everything from surface water management to tile subsoil to irrigation to regenerative ag. It can continue on and on, right? But what's at the core of making good decisions that will get to the results you want there is good data. That's my perspective. And I really, really believe that for improved productivity at the farm gate, growers need to have a vision to a longer-term data strategy. That's number one. And we're having a lot of that discussion with growers right now. And it's a lot of growers are saying, okay, I can collect the data, but where's my real value? So then we get into conversations about, well, what we need to be thinking about is moving away from just being a bulk commodity producer to being a supplier to ultimately an end consumer. And they're going to have demands. Those demands are going to back up to the processing side. From the processing, it's going to go to the buyer side. From the buyer side, it's going to go to the grower. So there are some opportunities for premiums today in the market. Not a lot. And I think that raises a level concern or skepticism from the growers to say, like, I can do all this and there's some cost to this, but what am I getting for that? And my position with the grower is that, look, the tools that are now coming to market from the manufacturers are a lot easier to use in the process of collecting data. It is not yet to the point where it's simple push button and it's automatically done, but we're getting close. Like, they are simplifying the process of georeferencing, geolocationing, automation in terms of data collection. And then you have organizations like ours or others who will clean the data and make sure that your data is really reflective of what took place. So then you can get accurate insights. And what we're telling growers is you need to be thinking out 5 to 10 years. So if we think about data, maybe there's an opportunity for premiums. But to get a premium, you're going to be able to prove out that you have produced the crop in a certain way. So if you have your data and strategy in place, you'll be able to prove that out, number one. Number two, I really believe that farm policy, the federal government farm policy, is going to evolve and change in the next 5 to 10 years. And at the very core of that is going to be leveraging and making better decisions around and using data. And so if you as a grower can capture your data, and the more data you have, that's good, clean data, you're going to be best positioned to take advantage of whatever that farm policy might be.
Really interesting, Ray. So then if you're a producer listening to what you're saying, then it's really, you're collecting the data to give you the possibility of premiums, to give you the possibility of future compliance, right? Even if we can't guarantee any of those outcomes, those outcomes are not possible unless you've got a good data stream.
Breaking out of the commodity stream, right? Value adding, you're differentiating.
Absolutely. And so this is the conversation we've started to have with our growers. And I know, Fred, I've had conversations with Darcy at FCC, and your conversation is maybe a little bit different with them in terms of the terminology, but I think we're on the same page. We're talking to our growers to say, you need to treat your production data as your intellectual property. I think if you can think about it that way, then you are in control of that, and you will be able to extract the optimum value that you can going forward. Maybe in the form of premiums, maybe in the form of compliance, maybe in the form of having access to new crop varietals based on output and compliance through that. So there's a number of pieces attached to that. So I think in the past there's been too often growers have been asked to work with companies on the data side that, and I think it's evolving. I think it's certainly evolving, and there is more and more of a recognition right now that grower production data is his grower production data, and he needs to decide where and how he can really leverage that data to bring value to his organization. So that's, from my perspective, of everything else that's going on, and we can talk lots about where equipment's going and new equipment, because that's shiny and exciting and everything. And I could talk about the new X9 combine and all its increased capacity, which gets a lot of attention. But my vision, our vision as an organization, is that to best prepare our customers for taking advantage of opportunity in the next 5 to 10 years, you need a clear, strong data strategy at the farm gate. And then you're in control, and you can take advantage of any opportunity that comes your way. So from my perspective, that would be one of the biggest challenges and opportunities we have as we look out 5 to 10 years.
That's really thought-provoking, Ray. Thank you.
Yeah, what I would add to that is, now I'm going to shift to the rest of the value chain, and where I believe, again, our challenge and opportunity is, and it's around how do we do a better job of integrating, collaborating, and thinking about data across that value chain. And I know, Fred, we've had some other conversations, and there's a couple of initiatives going on right now, but that is really, so the growers can do all their work at the farm gate, but we need to be able to connect it through the value chain. And I think there's a lot of activity going on there right now, but what we all need to do as an industry is be open to saying, we're not going to be able to agree to one strategy, but we should have a pretty good line of sight to this roadmap on where we are going and what we want to achieve in a collaborative, engaged environment. So
I think it's really important for younger companies too that may be wanting to play across that entire value chain to hear that, Ray. That the data is the farmer's intellectual property. That's a wonderful framing, and also that while we all want this, we got to make sure the producer is a partner the whole way.
Absolutely.
The whole way along.
Yeah.
Well, that's great, Ray. You certainly gave us lots to think about, and I think I'm excited, like you, the potential of value adding to our farms with data and analytics, and as the future even gets more complex with machine learning and AI. And it wasn't many years ago where we had data everywhere, but it was stranded. So the Internet of Things and connectivity. Now we're starting to unlock some of that great potential. I think we better leave it here for today. This was terrific, and congratulations on all your success and your leadership and vision with Enns, helping farmers unlock some of that potential. Any last words, Ray or Fred?
One of the things I wouldn't mind if we just had a few minutes. I'd like to talk about the Emily Initiatives Conference.
Okay.
That's upcoming in November.
Perfect.
And it's so we had scheduled this conference for June of this year, and we've had to push it back, and so now we're scheduled for November the 4th.
Okay.
And the conference theme is around, there's been a number of conferences and meetings around talking about the disruption in agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about technology, and we got all this stuff that's coming at us. Our approach to this conference was a little bit different. It was around, we know we've been disrupted. So now, how do we have a better conversation about what actual next steps we all should be taking to actually move this along? And so our approach is to engage growers. So we're looking at some pretty strong participation, certainly from those growers that are extremely progressive as it relates to data. Because you're going to find the theme of this is, which also is a theme that John Deere uses, by the way, which is data is now the fuel. Data is not the exhaust, because that's how we've treated data for years.
Mm-hmm.
It is now the fuel, and it will drive innovation.
Mm-hmm.
It'll drive equipment development, crop productivity, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So the conference is focused on all of the industry and all of the value chain. So we're going to have growers, we're going to have buyers, we're going to have processors, and we're going to try to find a way to get packaging or consumer component of it as well. So we're planning to have both a live and a virtual component to it, depending on where we are with COVID-19 at that time.
Mm-hmm.
We're pretty excited about this first conference. You're going to see some panel discussions around how we can drive data connectivity and collaboration. We've got Todd Jensen, who is the initiator around Ag Data Transparent out of the United States, which has now been adopted by organizations like FCC and John Deere. And so we're pretty excited about that. And we think it's going to actually help crystallize the roadmap and actually bring collaboration. And we're going to talk a little bit about skills and talent. One of the areas I wouldn't mind talking to you a little bit about, Joe, is on the startup on the ag tech side and VenCap and acceleration. How do we support that? Perfect. And so it's a one-day event, and we're looking forward to launching that event coming up in November, and we'll have more information coming out from Emily.
Good. We'll add the website link to the bottom of this and help promote it as well.
Yeah, so right now, if you go to agenlighten.ca, I believe you can see it. But I just chatted with Jacqueline, who's our director of policy at Emily, and the link will be on the website here shortly. So
perfect. We'll make sure we can help,
and I got
help people find
to
it.
give a plug to FCC because they are going to be the title sponsor of the conference. So
We're looking forward to it, Ray.
you bet, absolutely.
Well, thanks.
We got lots more we could talk about in a future podcast.
You know what? We're gonna do this
will.
again. This was a lot of fun, and appreciate your feedback and thoughts, Ray, and same to you, Fred.
Thanks, Joe,
for joining us, and we'll have links to Enns and Emily on the underneath this video when it's ready to go.
That's excellent.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Fred. Appreciate it.